That's chill to know.
It's crazy when you really think about it, like how much we're just surrounded by language all day long. From the minute we wake up, it's just words, words, words. We hear them, we say them, we read them. Heck, we even think in words.
It's true. Language is like the air we breathe. It's so pervasive we almost forget it's there.
Exactly. And it's easy to just go with the flow, right? Not really paying attention to the specific words we're choosing or how they might be landing.
Yeah, we get so focused on the message itself that the actual language, the way we phrase things, can become an afterthought.
But that's where the real magic or the real trouble can hide. A slight shift in wording, just a tiny tweak, can make all the difference between connecting with someone and completely missing the mark.
It's amazing how those little changes, those subtle nuances, can completely change the game.
Which is exactly what we're diving into in this deep dive. We're all about giving you the tools to become a more effective communicator. And today, that means taking a closer look at the surprising power of specific word choices.
It's something that Don Coe was really attuned to. His work often highlighted how even seemingly minor miscommunications, often stemming from the words we use, could snowball into huge problems.
Right, and to help us really unpack this, we're turning to the research of Jonah Berger. He's a marketing professor at the Wharton School, and he's known for his best-selling book, Contagious, which delves into why things catch on.
Exactly, and now, in his new book, Magic Words, What to Say to Get Your Way, he's zeroing in on the power of language itself.
Think of this as your crash course in some super actionable insights. We're going to break down these magic words and give you the tools to start using them in your own life.
We'll be exploring everything from how to influence your colleagues and motivate your team to just having smoother, more productive conversations overall.
And we'll be focusing on how you can avoid those little linguistic missteps that can lead to misunderstandings, frustration, and even straight-up failure.
It's all about giving you the tools to get your point across effectively and really connect with the people you're communicating with.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a fascinating concept from Berger's Speak framework, the language of agency and identity.
So this idea revolves around how the words we choose can either resonate with people's sense of self, who they see themselves as and who they aspire to be.
It's like speaking directly to their identity, which can be super powerful.
Exactly, and to illustrate this, Berger talks about this really cool study with preschoolers at Stanford.
Preschoolers, huh? That's interesting.
Yeah, so the researchers were looking at a really common scenario, cleaning up.
Oh, the age-old struggle.
Right, so one group of kids was asked, can you help clean up? Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
But another group got a slightly different prompt. They were asked, can you be a helper?
Be a helper, that's a subtle difference.
It is, but the results were pretty significant. Just by shifting from asking for an action, help, to invoking an identity, helper, there was a 30% increase in the number of kids who actually participated in cleaning up.
Wow, 30% just from that tiny tweak in the wording, that's huge.
Right. It really highlights how powerful that language of identity can be. And think about it, help clean up is like a one-time action. It's very task-oriented. But be a helper. That suggests an ongoing role, an inherent quality.
It's like it taps into this desire we all have for a consistent self-narrative. If a child sees themselves as a helper, they're more likely to continue those helping behaviors to reinforce that image.
Exactly. And this principle, it wasn't just limited to preschoolers. They found similar results in studies on voter turnout.
Oh, interesting. So how did that play out?
Well, they asked some people, can you please go vote? Which, again, is a pretty standard request.
Right.
But then they asked another group, can you be a voter? And you know what? There's a 15% increase in voter turnout just from that small shift to emphasizing the identity of a voter.
15%, that's a remarkable jump, especially for something as important as voting.
Exactly. And it all comes back to this idea that we're often more motivated by our desire to embrace and uphold positive identities than we are by just completing a task.
It's like we're constantly trying to align our actions with how we see ourselves, or how we want to be seen by others.
Precisely. And this is something we can all apply in our own lives. Think about how you want to be perceived, maybe as competent, knowledgeable, reliable, and then consider how you can use language to reinforce those identities.
So instead of saying, I run, you might say, I'm a runner. It's a small change, but it subtly reinforces that identity, both internally and externally.
Exactly, and it works for all sorts of things. Drinks coffee versus is a coffee drinker. Hardworking versus a hard worker. It's about shifting from something you do occasionally to something that's more deeply ingrained, more a part of who you are.
I love how Berger uses the example of saying, I am a creator, instead of I create videos.
It's so powerful, right?
It is. It just sounds so much more impactful. It suggests this deeper commitment, and honestly, it might even influence how you perceive your own work.
And this concept, it's not just about positive identities. Research suggests that even framing negative behaviors in terms of identity can be effective.
Oh, interesting. So how does that work?
Well, think about campaigns that focus on don't be a litter bug. It's more effective than just saying don't litter, because people generally want to avoid adopting undesirable labels.
Right, it clashes with how they want to see themselves.
Exactly. So whether you're trying to motivate yourself, encourage someone else, or even discourage negative behavior, this idea of tapping into identity through language can be incredibly effective.
It's like a secret weapon for influencing behavior.
In a way, it is.
Okay, so we're seeing how this subtle shift towards identity-focused language can be really impactful. It can motivate us, influence others, and even help us break bad habits.
Right, and failing to tap into that can really limit our effectiveness.
Now let's move on to another fascinating area that Berger explores within this realm of agency and identity.
Okay, what's that?
It's the impact of using should versus could when we're trying to solve a problem.
Should versus could? That sounds pretty nuanced.
It is, but it can make a world of difference. You know how when we hit a roadblock, our natural instinct is often to ask ourselves, what should I do?
Yeah, we're kind of programmed to think that way.
Right, but research suggests that this seemingly harmless question, it can actually limit our thinking.
Really? How so?
Well, the word should often implies that there's one single correct solution, which can create a sense of obligation and pressure.
It's like we're putting ourselves in a box, limiting our options before we even start brainstorming.
Exactly, and we might miss out on other potentially better solutions because we're so focused on finding that one right answer.
So, what's the alternative?
Berger suggests that instead of asking, what should I do, we should try asking, what could I do? It's such a small change, but it can have a huge impact on our thinking.
That's fascinating. So just by swapping out one word, we can open up a whole new world of possibilities.
Exactly. Could implies a range of options, different paths to explore, even if some of those ideas seem a bit unconventional at first. It's about expanding our mental playing field.
So it encourages more creative problem solving.
Absolutely. And this isn't just some theory. Researchers found that when people ask themselves, what could I do? They came up with more solutions, and those solutions were often more innovative and effective.
That's pretty compelling evidence. I'm definitely going to try incorporating this into my own problem-solving process.
Me too. It's such a simple shift, but it can really make a difference.
And this applies not just to individual problem-solving, but also to teamwork and brainstorming sessions.
Oh, absolutely. Instead of asking your team, what should we do? Try asking, what could we do? You might be surprised by the creative ideas that emerge.
It's about fostering a culture of possibility rather than restriction.
Exactly, and that's a recipe for innovation.
Okay, so we've talked about agency and identity, and we've seen how powerful those concepts can be.
Right, but there's another key element of Berger's speak framework that we need to explore.
And what's that?
It's the language of confidence, which delves into how the level of certainty or uncertainty in our speech influences how others perceive us and our message.
Certainty versus uncertainty. That sounds interesting.
It is, and to illustrate this, Berger brings up a pretty striking example, the speaking style of Donald Trump.
Ah, okay, I see where this is going.
Now, before we go any further, I want to be clear, we're not here to talk politics, okay? This is strictly about analyzing his communication style.
Yeah, fair enough.
Regardless of your political views, you can't deny that Trump's communication approach has been incredibly effective with certain audiences.
Right, he definitely has a way of connecting with people.
And a big part of that, Berger argues, is his use of absolute statements like, I will build a great wall, and nobody builds better walls than me, believe me. His language just oozes with certainty.
Yeah, he rarely hedges or qualifies his statements. It's very definitive.
Exactly. He uses a lot of strong language like definitely true, clearly the best way, unquestionably guaranteed. It's all about projecting absolute conviction in what he's saying.
So it's less about the content itself and more about the way he delivers it, that aura of confidence.
Exactly. And this isn't unique to Trump. We see it in all sorts of influential figures, successful salespeople, charismatic leaders, even popular thought leaders.
There's something about that unwavering certainty that draws people in.
And research backs this up. Studies have shown that people tend to prefer communicators who sound more confident, even if their predictions aren't actually any more accurate.
Wow, so sometimes it's more about perception than reality.
It seems that way. The projection of confidence can make it harder for listeners to believe that the speaker could be wrong.
It's like the confidence itself becomes a persuasive element.
Right, but here's the thing. Most of us, we don't naturally communicate this way, do we?
Not at all. I know I'm guilty of using a lot of hedging language. Words like might seems like, I think, possibly.
Oh, me too.
Oh.
It's so common, especially when we don't want to sound too assertive or we're trying to be polite.
Right, it's like we're softening the blow. But the problem is, all that hedging, it can undermine our persuasiveness.
It's like we're signaling to the listener that we're not even fully convinced ourselves, so why should they be?
Exactly. And that's where our language choices can inadvertently work against us.
So being aware of our hedging language and trying to eliminate it, especially when we want to be persuasive and project confidence, is super important.
Absolutely. But what about situations where we genuinely are uncertain? Should we pretend to be confident even then?
That's a great question, and Berger addresses that directly. He says that instead of using vague hedging language, it's more effective to name the uncertainty directly.
So give me an example.
Sure, instead of saying, I'm not sure this will work, you could say something like, I believe this is a promising direction, but we need to carefully consider these 3 potential challenges.
Okay, so you're still acknowledging the uncertainty, but you're being specific and transparent about it.
Exactly. It shows that you've thought things through and identified potential roadblocks.
And that actually makes you sound more confident.
Exactly. It's a more considered and honest way of expressing uncertainty.
And another thing Berger mentions is taking ownership of our statements, even when we're expressing uncertainty.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the difference between saying it seems and saying it seems to me.
Okay, I see the difference. It's subtle, but it does change the feeling.
Right. When you use the first-person pronoun, to me, it connects you to the observation, and it can actually make you sound more confident.
It's like you're saying, I've given this some thought, and this is my assessment.
Precisely. Now, we also need to talk about those little verbal pauses, those ums, and acres that creep into our speech.
Oh, those pesky filler words.
Yeah, they might seem harmless, but they can really undermine our perceived certainty.
It's like we're signaling to the listener that we're unsure of what to say next.
Exactly. Berger suggests that we try to consciously replace those filler words with actual pauses.
So just embrace the silence.
Exactly. Good speakers often use pauses strategically to let the audience absorb information or to emphasize a point.
And if you're trying to break the habit of using filler words, recording yourself speaking can be really helpful.
It's like holding up a mirror to your speech patterns.
Okay, so it sounds like certainty is a powerful tool, but it's not about being blindly confident all the time.
Right. It's about using it strategically. There are times when projecting confidence is crucial, like during presentations or when you're trying to pitch an idea.
But there are also times when it's appropriate to express a degree of uncertainty, especially in collaborative settings where you want to encourage open discussion.
Exactly. You don't want to come across as closed off to other people's ideas.
So misjudging when to be certain and when to be uncertain, that can definitely lead to communication breakdowns.
Absolutely. It's all about reading the room and understanding the context.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into Berger's work, we should touch on another powerful linguistic tool that he discusses: posing questions.
Questions. We usually think of those as just a way to gather information.
Right, but Berger argues that they can do so much more than that.
Like what?
Well, questions can shape perception, focus attention, and even guide the direction of a conversation.
So like they're secretly steering the ship.
Exactly. And Berger highlights a really interesting aspect of this: asking for advice.
Oh, okay.
You know how sometimes we hesitate to ask for advice because we think it makes us look less competent or knowledgeable?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, we're admitting we don't have all the answers.
Right. But research shows that the opposite can actually be true. Asking for advice can actually make you seem more competent and intelligent.
Really? How does that work?
Well, it has to do with the fact that people are inherently, a little bit egocentric. They value their own opinions and insights.
So when we ask for their advice, it's like we're validating their expertise.
Exactly. It's a subtle form of flattery, and it can create a more positive impression and make them more willing to help.
So it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a strategic move.
It is, and it can be incredibly beneficial, not just for getting the information you need, but also for building stronger relationships.
I like that. So overcoming that initial reluctance to ask for advice, it can be a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And Berger goes on to explore other strategic uses of questions, like how to ask effective follow-up questions and even how to use questions in difficult conversations.
It sounds like there's a whole art to asking the right questions.
There is, and it's a powerful skill to master. Now, to give you a more complete picture of Berger's framework, let's briefly touch upon the remaining elements of speak.
Okay, sounds good.
So the S in speak stands for similarity and difference, which focuses on how linguistic similarity, both within and between groups, can influence things like team cohesion and engagement with content.
So it's about how our language can either create connections or build walls between us.
Exactly. And this is relevant for all of us, whether we're trying to connect with our colleagues, build a strong team, or create content that resonates with our audience.
It's about finding that common ground through language.
Right, and then there's the E, which stands for emotion.
Emotion, that's a big one.
It is, and Berger's research shows that emotionally charged language can significantly influence how deeply people engage with content.
So if you want your message to stick, you need to tap into people's emotions.
Exactly. Think about the stories that really grab your attention. They're usually the ones that evoke strong emotions.
And a failure to do that can leave your message feeling flat and forgettable.
And finally, we have the second C, which stands for concreteness.
Concreteness, so being specific and getting to the point.
Exactly. It's about using clear, tangible language to demonstrate that you're listening and to make your ideas more memorable and understandable.
So instead of being vague or abstract, you want to paint a vivid picture with your words.
Precisely. And research shows that concrete language builds trust and makes your message stick.
So when we look at the speak framework as a whole, similarity and difference, posing questions, emotion, agency and identity, confidence and concreteness.
It really gives us a comprehensive understanding of how language shapes our interactions and influences our ability to achieve our goals.
And it highlights how oversights or missteps in any of these areas can lead to communication breakdowns and less successful outcomes.
Absolutely. And remember, paying close attention to those elements of agency and identity and confidence, as we discussed earlier, can be especially illuminating when we're trying to figure out why communication sometimes goes wrong.
Right, because if our words inadvertently undermine our authority or fail to connect with someone's core sense of self, well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. So the key takeaway here is this. Language isn't just a neutral tool for conveying information. It's a powerful force that can shape outcomes.
And by becoming more mindful of the words we choose, and by consciously applying these magic words and the principles of the speak framework, we can all become more effective communicators.
Absolutely. We encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own language patterns. How do you typically frame your own actions and those of others?
Do you project confidence in your speech, or are you unintentionally undermining yourself with hedging language?
And are you taking advantage of the power of questions to guide conversations and build stronger connections?
These are all things to consider as you move forward.
And here's one final question for you to ponder. Think about the last time you experienced a miscommunication, a time when you felt like you weren't heard or understood.
Could a subtle shift in your language, a different word choice, have changed the outcome? It's something to think about.
Absolutely. Pay attention to the power of words, both the ones you use and the ones you hear.
If you're interested in learning more about the Speak framework and exploring Berger's research in depth, you can find tons of resources on his website, jonahberger.com.
And you can also follow him on LinkedIn and Twitter at @J1Berger.
It's a treasure trove of insights.
So here's to all of us becoming more intentional and effective communicators.
And unlocking the magic that lies within the words we choose.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.